Welcome to the Circle of Birth podcast. I'm your host and advocate, Ali Kranz. These podcasts are here to gather stories, people and information to better our understanding of the wisdom of birth and how we can reclaim our connections to birth from conception and beyond. You will hear stories not only from Australia but from all over the world, bringing together women, partners, midwives, doulas and all the people that have a birth story to share. So jump right in for this next Circle of Birth story. Welcome again, and this episode I finally got a chance to capture my midwife and hear her stories of birth. I just adore Yvonne and created such a special bond with her in the last half of my pregnancy. She came into this as our backup midwife and we were sure apprehensive as we already had a close bond to our other midwife, yet after 1 hour with her we were all giggles and love, and this what I felt is just true continuity of care. I really got to know her as a person and saw her great integrity and skill, and also she is a martial artist, a midwife martial artist. So her stories will revolve around 1984 when the norm was stirrups, enemas and routine shaving of the vaginal area. And so in this story, doctors with gumboots. So what I love about her story and these podcasts is her journey from a standard 1984 birth with all the procedures, and then Yvonne feeling that something wasn't right with her next pregnancy, totally taking charge of her body and having an empowering second birth 4 years later. Then she became a nurse and a midwife and a home birth midwife. Woohoo! Enjoy! Okay, hi Yvonne, welcome to the Circle of Birth podcast. I'm super excited to have you come and grace your beautiful presence because you were my midwife for my birth of Julia and I just adore you, so thank you.
You're welcome.
So did you want to just tell us a bit, we're going to hear two birth stories from you. And that's of your sons Michael and Ryan, and that's in 1981, and then Ryan was 1984. So it'd be really good to hear a story there for the 80s. And you're a midwife too, and a home birth midwife, of course. So maybe if you tell us a bit about yourself and your family, and then we can kick into your birth stories.
All right. Well, I actually had my two boys when I was quite young. We planned it that way. I wasn't a nurse. I wasn't a midwife at the time. I was 21 when I had my first, Michael. And I actually did what a lot of young people and first-time mums would do is I thought, well, you've got private health cover, you go to an obstetrician. I did. And my initiation into that was one visit with the specialist, him telling me I need to go for an ultrasound, which you didn't have in those days because it wasn't routine, because he thought I might have twins on board. And so on the day I went for this ultrasound, the sonographer then put the Doppler on my tummy and found the baby's heartbeat and said to me, "Oh, that's good. Now I'll tell you why the doctor sent you." And on the form he must have written that he couldn't find the heartbeat, but he didn't think that was something he should tell me. So, of course, his heartbeat was fine, and he went on to be 16 days overdue. I think he's so laid back even now because he was that, he was happy in there. He liked his womb service that much.
Womb service, love it.
Yep.
I haven't heard that one.
Yeah. He was cosy and he's so laid back even now. But so, of course, I was induced. Luckily, 16 days. Now they don't allow those limits. But and he did have his head in a funny position. And it wasn't until the day of the induction, of course, in those days, you had to have an enema. You had to have a bit of a shave, all those horrible things that they used to do to women. And
could you just tell the listeners that might not know what an enema is?
What an enema is? Oh, you get this lovely solution put up your backside to empty your bowels so that they're not in the way when the baby's born, or you don't soil yourself while you're giving birth. So I think that's why they used to do it. No one actually told you. They just told you you were going to have one. So,
and they're not routine anymore.
No, not at all now. No, that's well out of vogue now. Women can ask for one if they're particularly concerned about, soiling themselves during the birth. Some women really worry about it, but I always say it's a natural process and it doesn't matter if you do. And so the enemas nowadays are simple, easy, and the women can do them themselves. So certainly I offer it, but in those days you were just told this is what you have, and, you just think they know what they're doing and go along with it. So so on the day of the induction, of course, the doctor waltzes in to break my waters, and I really think if I hadn't have had my tonsils out, he would have been able to rip them out from the internal he did to break the waters. And I was not allowed off that birthing bed for the whole time I was in labour. And once again, I just sort of thought, this is what you do. And so I stayed on that birthing bed to the point where I even had to use a bedpan to wee. And I had another obstetrician who walked into the room, no knocking, just walked in. He had no shirt on, just his trousers, a green plastic apron that just went round the neck and tied at the back, and with gumboots on. Took one look at me and went, "Oh, wrong room," turned around and walked out again.
Oh, gosh.
I know.
Was he meant to be like in the veterinary surgery or something like that?
I think so. I'm so glad, even though I had an obstetrician, I'm glad he wasn't my obstetrician, because I was waiting for the rope to pull the baby out or something, the way it looked. But so as it turns out, I did eventuate in getting fully dilated and all those sort of lovely things where my cervix was ready and I wanted to push. And the doctor happened to make an appearance again just before that, and he said, I've got another woman at the other hospital. I'm going to go to her first and then I'll be back to you. Okay. So, of course, the midwives, it's like, don't push. And it's like, well, don't breathe, it'd be easier. So, of course, he did make it back and I had my baby, and he put in the cursory sutures, and then he was born at, about 9:15 at night. And then, of course, there's a shift change around the 11 o'clock mark. And we're going to go round to the ward, and then I find out my baby goes to the nursery overnight. All babies go to the nursery. So I'd waited 9.5 months, 10 months, or 10.5 months for my baby to be born, and he was taken off me for the night.
So this sort of information just wasn't available to people then?
No.
Did you do, did they have childbirth classes in the hospital or anything like that?
Sure did. Yeah, sure did. No, I didn't. Any of that. I was so naive. Like I said, I was 21 and, had never really thought about it. You sort of go with it. Wasn't well read in those days. And, so he was born and we had to stay in hospital 7 days. And, that was normal as well. And I didn't think you could say, I'm going home early. You just go along with the ride. And, of course, luckily when I went home, everything was fine, breastfed beautifully, and I had no issues at home. But it wasn't until I got pregnant again with my next boy in 84 that I went, why the hell did I do that to myself? I just suddenly clicked and went, I don't want to do that again. That's ridiculous. So I was going to midwives then. I wanted to just see the midwives and have them care for me. I never even thought about a home birth. It wasn't a word that was talked about as much in those days. It was almost like a covert operation.
Mm-hmm. Were you studying nursing at this point?
No, not yet. No, not yet. And so I thought, I'll go with the midwives. At least they're more personal. They listen to you, respect your choices. And then I find out at 37.5 weeks that the local hospital where I had my eldest son, Michael, the obstetricians were no longer going there. So everyone who was going to birth had to go to, the next hospital along, which was only 20 minutes away, not a problem. But then I was told I had to find an obstetrician, and I went, an obstetrician? I don't want an obstetrician. I did find one who, to this day, was one of the best we had in this area, but and he was lovely when I met him. But I thought, what do I do from here? He actually on the first visit said to me, pop across to the hospital and have a look around so you know where you'll be going. So I thought, okay, we'll do that. So we popped in there and I was met by this spinster midwife who said you will have a drip if you're more than 3 hours in labour. You will have an enema. I had a look around the unit. There was one shower and toilet for all the 6 rooms that were there. And I actually walked out of there and cried all the way home and said, I wouldn't let my dog have pups there. Why would I have my baby there? And my husband said, well, what do you want to do? And I thought, well, I'm going to ring the birth centre in Sydney and I'm going to talk to the midwives there. And he went, whatever you want. So I did. And I gave them my history and they were quite happy for me to actually go up there, see them. And I did the following week, so I was 38 and a half weeks. And they said, we're happy for you to birth with us. You will need to come to our doctor's clinic though and just get the form signed. I went, no problem. So I booked that for the following week.
Wow.
Yeah. I know. I still would have. I was, and I would have just turned up and I would have said, oh, well, the form's not signed. What are you going to do? So I went to the clinic and I saw this doctor and he sort of looked at me and he was humming and hawing about signing this form. I said, look, I've had all my care. And he still looked at me and I think I did this exorcist and my head spun around 360 and I went, sign it. And he signed it so quick and gave it to me and went, good luck. And that was on the Tuesday. And then my Ryan decided to come on the Thursday morning. And the drive up to Sydney from my place is probably, well, it could be about an hour and a half, depending on traffic. But luckily it was the middle of the night, as most babies like. And so the travel there wasn't too bad. And, of course, when I got there, being in the birth centre, it was so relaxed. The midwife, you have one midwife looking after you and they're just in and out and not intrusive. And I tried the bath and didn't like it. And so then I got up and out of the bath and I tried the shower and I stayed in the shower until I was ready to have him because the shower, I don't think it was big enough for, my mother was in there with me at one stage, not in the shower, but in the shower area. And my husband was at the door and you wouldn't get anyone else in there. So I got out of there, went into the birth room, which was just a normal bed, and gave birth to my boy. And so he was born at 6:30 in the morning. And then I went and had breakfast with the other women that had their babies.
Oh, wow, a little communal breakfast.
It was a communal breakfast. And then, of course, my baby stayed with me. And I stayed that night and I actually said to the midwife that night, because my toddler had come up with my husband and brought him up that afternoon. He cried when he left and I went, I don't want to be here. So I said to the midwife, I'm going home in the morning. And she looked at me because in those days it was still you stay in hospital for 5 to 7 days. And I just said, I'm actually going home in the morning. Do what you need to do, but I'll be leaving. And so they checked me out, checked the baby out. And the next morning, of course, during the night, I also, when the midwife came in to check on myself and Ryan, she looked in the crib and she shook her shoulders and I just pointed to the bed and I went, yeah, he's in here with me. And I thought, you dare try and take him, he's staying with me. Yeah. And then I went home the next morning and, of course, later that day a midwife from the local hospital turned up and said, oh, we've got a bed booked for you in hospital. And I went, no, thanks, I'm where I want to be. And she said, oh, well, you'll need to bring him in on day 3 for that newborn screening test that they do. And I said, no problems, I can do that. And that was the last contact I had with any help, which was fine. I just thought, I'm happy, I want to be home with my 2 boys and
wow. So
get on with it.
Where do you feel, I'm just picturing you back to that moment saying, I don't want to birth like this again, just before Ryan was born.
Yes.
Where did all that strength come from without, look in our modern world and we've got so many resources now that we can tap into, on the internet and beyond, it's great what's happening. So where did you draw from to get that strength and empowerment to have that birth that you wanted?
Yeah, I'm pretty determined, but I think what it was that being told I had to go to an obstetrician. It was suddenly that choice was going to be taken away from me, and I could feel that I was going to end up with a birth like I did with my first boy, where all my choices were taken away, that I wasn't able to do what I wanted to do. And I went, I'm not going to do that again. I'm just not going to do that. This is not what I want and not what I could see for my baby either. That I thought, no, I need to do something different. I know it was quite towards the end of the pregnancy, but I still thought, no, I need to change this. I'm not having that birth experience. And I think it was being pregnant again and reliving your past birth and going, why was I so stupid and allow that to happen to myself? And why did I just hand over, myself, my body, and my, the safety of my baby, and didn't even think about it? I thought, why did I let that happen? It's really interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
So I think the question is probably the same still now on a lot of women's minds, and I know I had that same thing with me, with Mally's birth. After that, it was like, well, why I'm such a creative, intelligent person and I make all these decisions with confidence, and why did I allow myself to not stick up for myself in those terms?
It is, isn't it?
And so how did it feel just when you birthed Ryan? What was the feeling like when he came out? Could you sort of take us through that moment?
It was amazing because, like, my mother came up with us. She was worried she was going to be catching this baby in the car, and I went, great, if he comes out that quick, that's fine, I don't mind. But when he was born, he had cord around his neck and under his arm, and, I mean, 1 in 3 babies have cord, and it doesn't cause them a problem, and so the midwife was going, his head's out, oh, will I cut this cord? Won't I cut this cord? And I just pushed. I thought, no. He's just going to be born, leave him alone, And he came out, she unwrapped the cord, and of course he's just lying there. And I think my mother, because she had a home birth, because that's what you do in Holland, with my brother 59 years ago, and he was breech, so bottom first and everything. And it reminded her of his birth, where he came out and was a bit, flat and needed a bit of help, reminding himself to breathe. And Mum said to me, she remembers looking at me going, but you were so calm. And I just knew that he was fine, and give him a second and, he'll just breathe. And so, the midwife just gave him a rub, and I just picked him up, and he just that was the end. He was fine, So
that definitely shows too, when your mother has a good perception on birth, that passes over to you.
Exactly.
That knowing. Wow, I'd love to hear more about your mum's birth stories. That sounds really interesting too.
We went back to Holland in June, my brother, his wife, my husband and I, and my mother, to see where my brother was born. But of course it was a farmhouse, but that's no longer a farmhouse. But in the little town he was born in, he could never get his birth certificate. And on the day, we stayed there about 2 nights, and we found the council chambers, thanks to the information centre, and most people speak English there as well. And the woman said, oh, yeah, I've got it right here. Do you want a copy? And I said, finally, you're legal after all these years. Yeah. It was quite amazing to think he was born in this little town, and that's just what you did. Yeah. That's what our parents did.
And it's still the same over there too, isn't it? It's quite the norm for home births.
It is. I bumped into a lady on the way back to the airport, and she was an air stewardess, and she was pregnant, and I could just tell, and my husband gave her a seat. Not that she was big and pregnant, but she looked upset, and I said to my husband, give her a seat. And then I said to her, being a midwife, I just said, are you pregnant? She said, yes, I am. And I said, tell me, how do you have your babies over here? And she said, well, over here we have them at home, and the only reason you go to hospital is if you have a medical problem. So if you actually want to birth in a hospital with no medical problem, it costs you money to birth in the hospital. And I went, finally. Yeah. Someone's got it right.
And their statistics are quite amazing too. Like they are. Yeah, they're incredible. In terms of hospital transfers and that type of thing.
And outcomes and all that too. They're all quite amazing. Yes.
Yeah. Wow, thank you for sharing those stories. And I would love if you could just tell us a little bit more about your journey into midwifery, because I'm sure a lot of your empowerment in your second birth probably came into the person that you are now and the amazing midwife that you were, especially for my birth. And I feel like, you know, and I'm sure many women do feel like that you're a very trusted person in my circle of life now. So I'll never forget you, that's for sure.
I actually started nursing when my Ryan was 2 and Michael was 5. So Michael was at school, and Ryan would go. My husband was shift worker then, so he would go, if I was going to uni, he would go to my mum's, which he loved. So he was always either with my mum or my husband or myself, depending on uni. I did that for 3 years, and then I did some nursing in medical ward, surgical ward, and I thought, no, this is not where I'm meant to be. And so I applied to do, I could have done it through the local university, but of course you have to do so many days a week and you can't actually work as well. And I thought, well, I was only working part-time, and because my husband was a shift worker as well, we worked our shifts to opposite so that the boys would only be minded for an hour, if that. And I thought, no, I have to do something that means more, and this isn't the nursing side I need. So that's when I applied then for Charles Sturt University, which does it by correspondence, and you actually work full-time in the hospital. So I had to do two residential schools at Charles Sturt at Wagga, and that was the start of my midwifery career in 96. So it was a pretty intense year. My husband was doing his MBA at the same time, and I was putting in a heck of a lot more assignments than he was even looking at, and doing shift work and 2 young children. So it was a really hard year, but at the end of that year, it was just amazing. I remember a midwife towards the end of my second rotation in the birthing unit, and, you know, these dreaded internals that women don't like. I remember doing one, and the midwife would do it first on this lady, and I still today think, oh, my gosh, we're subjecting women to 2 internals, but how else do we teach it? And I think, I've learnt since then, let me tell you. And then I'd do an internal, and I'd tell her what I found, and she hit me and said, you can't know that yet. You're only just learning this. So I don't know, it just came naturally to me. But I did that, you know, the training, finished that, rotated in all the different areas for a while. And then I managed to get a caseload job where we actually look after couples throughout their pregnancy, look after them during their labour and birth, and then look after them at home for a couple of weeks after. And 4 years into that, they decided we could start doing some home births as well. And it was interesting doing the home births. It's something I always thought I wanted to do. But then I found that doing it through the hospital system, it was really still quite regimented. Women had to jump so many hurdles that even at 37 weeks they could be told, sorry, now you're not appropriate for a home birth, because they have to do all the blood tests, all the swabs, all the ultrasounds, and then get told right towards the end of their pregnancy, sorry, too bad that you've hired a birth pool, but you can't have a home birth now. So I sort of did that for a while, and then I started to feel that the hospital was getting stricter and stricter. There was policies for a policy. You know, more and more choices were being taken away from women. And I thought, no, I don't want this anymore. So I left the hospital system and thought, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. You know, midwifery was where I was supposed to be. So I thought about it, and that's when I called up a friend who I'd known had been doing home births for 20 years, and I said, you know, have you got any work for me? And she said, boy, have I. And that's where my journey into actual proper, what I call home birthing, not a hospital home birth, started to happen. And difference has been amazing. You know, we always could sit back, watch a woman just labour and birth, and really, what does she need? She needs to make sure she's getting a drink, but she needs those words to say, you're doing beautifully, everything's well, trust in your body, and you'll birth this baby. And we don't need to do internals. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
All those things.
We had such a many conversation in my pregnancy when I sort of met you towards the end, because you initially were my backup midwife, and then the circumstances happened and you became the midwife. And yes, we had a lot of conversations, and a lot of it went around internals too, because I expressed my concerns with my first birth of the internals that I thought were just routine and I had to do it.
Yes.
But how uncomfortable that made me feel. So definitely, it's definitely something that's getting spoken about a lot and needs to be talked about more.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of people with trauma in their life too that may not really necessarily enjoy, or not enjoy, that's not an enjoyable thing, but may not necessarily feel at all, you know, could send off a trigger, I suppose, into their trauma. And if you're getting that done during your labour, even worse. So
I had a lady I looked after in the hospital who, when I first booked her in, this was her second child, first with a new partner. Her daughter was already about 16 and or something, you know, older, not a young child. And I remember asking her in a history a question, you know, that we ask, and it was one that she said, I don't want to answer that. And it straight away set up this red flag going, something's happened to this woman. I don't know what it is. And I just sort of said, have you had counselling for it? No. Okay. Wow, this is going to be hectic doing this birth, because she wasn't open to whatever it was. And I knew it had to be something traumatic in her life. And, you know, we did a lot of debriefing about her daughter's birth and then went on talking a lot about birth. But it came to her doing the swab at 36 weeks and it was positive. And straight away she said, that's what happened with my daughter's birth. And this whole negative mindset just kicked right in, and I went, uh-oh. I thought, this is not good. How do I help this woman through this? And she went into labour, but she just wouldn't progress. You could see she was so fearful. She actually, you know, being in hospital, time constraints, I said, we need to do something. You know, if we don't do something and then, you know, something's prolonged and something happens, they go, well, why didn't you intervene here and why didn't you do this? And I said to her, the only way I think we're going to get this moving is to break your waters. What do you think? And she went, yes, I think that's what we're going to need to do. And I said, are you okay with me doing that? And she said yes. But as soon as I got a glove and that out, she actually turned away from me and wouldn't look at me, wouldn't interact with me. And I said, are you sure you're okay with me doing this? And she said yes, but she never made eye contact. So I tried to be as gentle as I could be. You could feel she was tense. And I tried to break these waters, which is very hard when a woman's resisting. And I always say to women, if I had to do an internal, if there was a reason to do one, I said, you tell me to stop and I stop. And that's, you know, you're in control of this. I always say that to a woman. And I'd said that to her, but she just shut down. Anyway, I could not break these waters. I finished. I just said, that's it, I'm not doing this anymore. And I wasn't rough. I'm never rough doing them. And I finished doing that internal. She still wouldn't interact with me. I said, look, I'll be back in a minute. I needed to just get out of that room. And I walked out of that room. I went to the front desk and I just burst into tears. And the girl said to me, are you okay? And I said, no, I feel like I've just violated this woman. It's not okay. And that's how I felt. And, you know, she ended up having this baby. But then she did get pregnant again and she'd rung me. And I looked up, she wanted me to look after her again. only this time she opened up. Her husband didn't even know about this trauma she'd had in her life. And I thought, how does he not know? Anyway, after she opened up and we did a lot more debriefing and talking, this woman came in. She hired a doula this time. And you know what? She had the most beautiful... She had a bit of a... The shoulders did get stuck and they needed... I wasn't there at the birth. I couldn't make... I was in Newcastle. I was so far away. And I left to come back. But so my colleague had to look after her. And shoulders were a bit stuck. But other than that, she had all her own choices. And she still birthed her baby on all fours and did it herself and laboured beautifully. And I think part of that was her coming to terms with what had happened in her past. And she'd actually gone to a counsellor during that pregnancy. And I actually said to her, find one that you can then talk to your husband about too. And she did all of that. And it was just amazing. But I'll never forget that internal that I had to do on this woman. And I thought, there's got to be a better way than this. And, it's amazing, isn't it? And I see doctors walk in there when there's issues with a woman and they go to do an internal and I go, hang on a minute, hello, I'm Dr. So-and-so, do you mind if I do this internal? And they look at me and I go, well, would you like if I walk in and just shove my fingers up your backside?
Yeah, I think this just really shows how continuity of care and
yes,
the job of a midwife is not just helping the baby come out and operating the machines, and it's so much more. There's so many hats that a midwife has to wear, and to allow a midwife to be, her full potential is, especially ones such as yourself with the experience that you can offer, is truly healing. And I just think it's wonderful, like that woman's journey, that she found an outlet where she could heal and go on to have a birth experience that didn't trigger the trauma.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, pretty incredible.
Yeah. So thank you very much for coming on.
Oh, you're welcome.
How about a little bit of a birth debrief before we wrap it up? From my birth, it would be good to get your perspective on things. We can maybe just have a little chat about my birth. And
yes.
I obviously did the podcast of Julia's story in episode 1. So maybe just tell me what it was like from your, I was going to say angle, but that's not probably the right word, your point of view. How was I? Was I, all over the place, or
no, you were you were a birthing woman. You were exactly how I'd expect you to be. I suppose women, when they're birthing their baby, they're vulnerable. And that can that's why that presence needs to be there, really, just for us to be there and look at you and go, we've got a smile on our face, everything's good, just to bring that confidence back into you. And I think that's what I saw it when I got there, that, you relaxed.
Yeah, and I felt relaxed. And I felt your presence, and
yes.
I felt there was one moment I remember when you were setting up all the equipment, the oxygen and whatnot, and I looked up and you were in the kitchen with Ingrid, and I just looked over and I just felt so warm and comfortable. I was like, oh, there they are. And you were having a laugh together and chatting and stuff, and I was like, oh, that, I was just so happy that you guys were there and you were just like having a nice time. And then there was another, and that feeling for me was like these two people here that I've chosen to be care providers in my birth have such an innate ability to see a woman and, know where she's at in labour, and you came in at the right time and you said probably a few words that needed to be said at the right time, and that was it. And it was just all beautiful. Yeah,
not disturb the space.
Yeah, you did, and you did that precisely well. And I just had so much faith in you. If you could tell if something needed to be changed or done.
Yes.
So I was able to go into my labour self and tap into my inner birthing mama self. And, it was such a vast difference from Mally's birth to this birth. So it was really great to have you there. And I remember, I'll never forget when Julia come out and you went, oh, there she is. She's popped out. Well, you didn't know she was a she at that point, but you went, so there's baby or it's popped out or something.
No. Yeah. Give away what sex they are, especially when couples don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think we looked for about 10 minutes.
No, and that's fine. I've had one of the parents will ask me, what is it? And I'll go, I don't know, that's not my job.
Yeah.
You have to have a look at that. Yeah. Even when I've seen what they are, I never tell, because that's part of the journey, I think, is discovering what you've had, and checking your baby out. And
it's quite exciting because you have them there and you kind of forget for a while and you're like, oh, wait a second, there's something else. There's like another little element of surprise that you get on top.
It is, isn't it? That surprise is always lovely.
Yeah. Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you for coming on the show and sharing those. Definitely, again, was an empowering journey that you've just shared with us, especially to show what's changed since 1981. We've still got a fair bit of way to go, but we've changed a lot, I suppose, in the world, and the work you're doing is great, and I'm sure you've helped. Well, I know you have helped and empowered a lot of women into their birth choices too.
Yes.
So thank you for being a part.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's been good.
Thank you.
So I suppose women have to remember they have the voice and they have the choice, and they have to stick with that and remember it's them that birth their baby.
Well said. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you connect with this episode? Then head over to our website, circleofbirth.com. There you'll find show notes, pictures, resources, and potentially connect with today's storyteller. Don't forget to sign up to be updated with new empowering episodes and content. Help the show grow by contributing a tip in the jar to make sure we can continue to better the podcast and connect more and more to the wisdom of birth and each other. Hey, and don't forget the iTunes rating. This has been another episode of the Birth Share Project. We breathe, we birth, we empower.